My name is Harrison Wheeler, and this is Technically Speaking. Glad to have your ears for the next 30-something minutes. I cannot express my gratitude enough as we take this path of enlightenment together, learning the stories of designers from all around the world. As simply put, this is a podcast about the human experience. Today's guest is principal designer, which we'll get into what that means a little bit later, and executive director of the Inneract Project that is now 16 years strong, Maurice Woods. We discuss the origins of the Inneract Project and its mission to empower underrepresented youth through design education and opportunities to explore design in career and life. During the show, we reflect on how his professional basketball career played a role in bringing on the duality of existing in different spaces, and how the mentorship of prolific Seattle-based musician and design pioneer Tony Gable kept him on the right track. Here's Maurice in his own words.
I feel like as I played sports, I've done the nonprofit thing. I've worked in various different areas in design, and it's really sort of helped me become who I am and be able to sort of, you learn a lot when you're around a lot of different people from different perspectives and see the world differently when you have, sort of existed in all these various different spaces and places.
Well, that's it for the intro. Let's get into the show. My guest today is Maurice Woods. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, man, for having me on here today, Harrison. And, I really appreciate it and being able to, tell my story. First and foremost, I am a designer. It's funny because, I've worked as an executive director and founder of Inneract Project for so long that people forget the fact that I'm a designer. So I got to start saying that at first. I'm a designer. And, I've, throughout my life in design, I've worked across advertising. I've worked at, places like Pentagram Design, where it's basically a traditional print branding design agency. And then from there, I had my own startup for a little bit, a business called Convozine. And then from there, I went to work at Yahoo as a senior designer, visual designer / product designer. And then to where I am now at Microsoft, which, I'm a product designer, a principal product designer there, working on a variety of things from, anything from machine learning and AI to, designing and leading the latest family safety mobile app, as well as visual design and branding. I kind of have my hands in a lot of various different things. And, from the founder side of things, I started a nonprofit called Inneract Project that I've been working on now for over 16 years.
Dope. So you mentioned you're doing your hands in a lot of things. What exactly is a principal designer? And it would be interesting at least to explain to the audience, like, what does that sort of different career segmentation look like?
Yeah. Principal designer is, I guess the best way I can really explain it is a designer who is capable of leading and running projects, whether that be as an individual contributor or as a manager. And the level of responsibility is really leaning towards someone who is capable of taking a project from, its sort of beginning stages. And being able to sort of drive that work and bring a certain perspective to help either launch a product, make a product better, or actually design the product themselves. So, I'm an individual contributor. I chose that because of the work that I do at Interact Project, I'm already really busy, and I felt like I'm already managing people on that side, and that it was important for me to, stay an individual contributor so that I can continue doing that without having to manage
Mm,
more people outside of
right.
managing people in Interact Project. And then I think also the individual contributor role was helpful in me being able to, um, you know, flex my creative side. It's like,
Sure.
as a manager, sometimes you have to deal with the day to day of people management, and it's not that anything's wrong with that. But for me personally, I like to actually create things and make things. So there was a bit of,
Yeah.
interest in continuing to do that. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's sort of this a little bit of a misnomer that if you want to grow in design, you have to move into management. But there are
that's
indeed
right.
sort of IC tracks where there are a lot of senior roles.
Yep.
So it's great to kind of see you exemplify what that means at its highest level while maintaining operationally Interact Project. Um, so man, just kind of like looking into to doing my research on you. You grew up in Richmond, California,
Yep.
and also in the past, you played professionally.
Yep. I sure did,
Um,
man. You know,
yeah,
I
man.
it's funny because I was talking to I was it was funny because I was talking with uh, a friend of mine the other day,
Yeah.
and I was just telling him how, as a designer, people don't really realize how tall I am until they actually see me. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
like in Zoom calls, like I'm sitting down, so people are like, "Oh, okay." But when they actually see me, they're stunned because I was like, "Man, I know you played basketball, but I didn't know you were that tall." And
How tall are
I'm
you?
6'10". So,
Wow.
I tower up there. So people are
Yeah.
sometimes taken back because they don't realize
Yeah.
that, and it's not common, obviously, like,
No.
you don't see like almost 7-foot designers walking around. But like,
Right.
I started off my career wanting to be an NBA star. And
Mm,
as early as high school, I've always been the tallest kid on the block. And,
mm.
in my neighborhood, we were all doing sports. We were doing basketball, football, and music. And, you know, basketball got me a scholarship to a
Right.
school, which allowed me to get exposed to, design. So I'm very grateful for that. And
Right.
after graduating from college and, getting that degree and also being on a basketball team there, I was able to take my skills and continue to play professional basketball. I played in Spain, an island in the Canary Islands called Fuerteventura, and I played there for a season. Basically, the season's about 9 months, 9 to 10 months out of the year. And then after that, I was on the Canary Islands again, another island called Tenerife in
Mm,
Spain. And all during that time, we traveled all over Spain playing teams.
right.
And then the third year, I was in Greece. I played for a team called Papago, which is named after the city Papago, where I stayed. And after
Wow.
that, I was in Gravelines, in it's in a northern western point in France. And
Wow.
then after that, I spent the rest of my years in Japan, in Osaka and Niigata. So I've had a great experience, and this is all before I played basketball. It's like I tell people, it's like I have like separate lives. I feel like, because I
Mm,
play sports. I've done the nonprofit thing. I've worked in various
yeah.
different areas in design, and it's really sort of helped me sort of become who I am, and be able to sort of you learn a lot when you're around a lot of different people from different
Yeah.
perspectives, and see the world differently when you have, sort of existed in all these various different spaces and places.
How long was the basketball career?
Total was about 7 years, so about six
Wow. Okay.
seasons, and it kind of overlapped. So it was it was quite a bit of time, and
Yeah.
there were some good moments and some bad moments. It's like being away from
Yeah.
home. Although it's nice to be in exotic places, and the Canary Islands was beautiful, and Greece was beautiful, Japan and France. You do get homesick.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, just being over there 9, 10 months out of the year, and then you're home for like, it feels like a month, really, and then you got to
Right.
go back. And
Yeah.
so it just gets a little old. And I was over there for, quite a bit of time. And then, I was kind of ready to settle. And towards the end of my basketball career, I was kind of like really more interested in design, honestly. I was kind of
Yeah.
eager. I wanted to do that. And,
Yeah.
I started bringing my laptop over there, and I was like just designing things on my own. And
Yeah. How was that experience with your teammates? Because
yeah.
uh, I don't know if you know this about me, but I actually played football in
Oh,
college,
I didn't know that.
so yeah, I can relate to the living different lives because there are people that know me as an athlete, and then there are people that know me
Right,
as a designer, and then some people are like, I get the same thing. I'm not close to 7 feet, but I definitely don't look like
right.
the stereotypical designer. And so when you're around these different people kind of working on design, did you get any like different sort of reactions from folks? What were people like? Were they like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I got to tell you this funny story, although it's probably not so funny in theory. But I remember, I won't say where this happened at, but it was at a company that I worked at. And there
Okay.
was this guy who, this white guy. And, I've known him, for, at least a year. We're not like buddy buddy or anything, but we are on calls
Yeah.
together. And we finally were working together. And, we had this project or this thing we had to do together. And we had a meeting. And, he was just intrigued. And he felt like it was
Mm.
important for him to, express how intrigued he was about who I was. And he was like, man, I just, when I first saw you, I just didn't think that you would be a designer. And he didn't really, I mean, it was like totally like a racist thing to say. But he was trying to be genuine about it. I didn't really feel like he had any malice in his heart, but I was stunned by
Yeah.
what he said. Obviously, I was like, "What? What are you talking about?"
Right.
And he was just like, "Yeah, when I saw you, I just, you're really tall. You look like, a basketball player, and I just never would have thought that you would be, doing this kind of work and this quality of work or this type of thing." And I'm
Mm.
like, and at that point, I'm like trying to change the topic, right? I'm like, all right, man,
Right.
you're kind of going there with it. You're gonna get me mad now. So let's just change the subject.
Right.
But people's response to me is often that of surprise and intrigue because even outside of being a designer, people are always intrigued by my height because you don't see that many tall people like myself walking around. And most people
Right.
associate people with my height with NBA and the intrigue around tall people
Mm.
in the NBA. So they just respond that way. And sometimes
Right.
it's a response of, wow, I can't believe how tall you are. Wow. And then
Mm.
sometimes it gets annoying, like when you're out and you're trying to
Yeah.
do something serious and somebody is asking you a million questions that you don't want to answer. And,
Yeah.
that stuff happens in design and in both. It's just people's reaction, you know. But
Right.
I've kind of heard it all at this point. So
Mhm.
um, I'm pretty chill about it as long as people are respectful around how they do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So look, we talked about the basketball career, but I think the underlying theme here is that you've been in design your whole life, and
yeah,
so how did your childhood and your upbringing play a role into the journey that you've made so far, and even kind of looking into your career? Like early on, you started out, um, you were doing agency work, and I also saw that when you first started out designing, you also started the Inneract
yeah.
Project. What was the motivating factor behind that?
Well, it started for me when I was a kid. I think as a young person, I mean, I grew up in Richmond, and it was the hood,
Mm,
and,
yeah.
you know, I I didn't know anything about the arts or design or anything like that. I was just a little creative kid that, liked to draw and liked to take things apart and put them back together. That was it, and that was fun to
Right.
me. Um, I never thought about, a career. I was on a basketball track. And I
Mm,
think that the now that I look back on where I am now, I see that that uh, interest in being creative, and then also the mix of the fact that my father and my mother were um, strongly sort of strong components of Black culture, and supporting like the movement. My father was an Oakland police officer. So,
mm,
he was like, from East Oakland, and he was raised around like, the same things that I was raised around. And he always had this perspective around like, doing good for people of color, and doing what you can
mm,
to support other Black people, and being prideful in who you were. So that was just instilled with me as a young
right.
person. And as I started to sort of grow in my career, specifically like, with basketball, it always was within me. And then when I got into design, uh, you know, it was crazy, because it's like I went from Richmond, where there was a lot of Black folks, first of all, to Seattle, where it was just like it wasn't really hardly any Black folk up there. And then, I went from playing basketball to design. Basketball, like my teammates, I had a lot of Black teammates, to
Mm,
design, where like I was the only Black person in the room. And
right.
so I think that, the experience of growing up the way that I did really sort of um, trained me, or got me prepared for where I am now, in terms of like my ability to be able to sort of separate work, life, and my culture, and be able to sort of understand that all those three things are part of who I am. I at least can acknowledge the fact that the various different ways of who I am and how I live my life can be sort of defined or not defined by the things that I do or I choose not to do. And
Mm,
you know, being a young person growing up, and having to figure things out, it's tough. And that's the reason why I kind of started Interact Project, is because it's like, you know, I sort of stumbled on design, right? Like I didn't like set out early in my life and say, man, I want to be a designer, because I see, logos, and things that I've always desired, as a young person. Um,
yeah.
the magazines, the jet magazines, and the layouts and stuff like that, right? Like I was looking at that stuff, but I'd never
Right.
really put the pieces together. And so,
Right.
as I started to get into design, I was like, oh man, I can actually, like, this is something that's kind of cool for me. And
Mm,
I fell in love with it pretty quickly. And so that's kind of how it kind of like started. And then after that, I left and I played basketball, and I came back from playing basketball, and I was like, you know what? I really love doing this. And I know that there's a lot of other kids out there that may not be like able to get a scholarship, or may not get exposed to
mm,
design at all, and may have this
right.
creative interest. And so I wanted to do something about it. And I was I was not honestly expecting that Interact Project would be what it is today. I just, you know, there was a grad class that I had taken, and I took the class, and it was about how to use design to change the world. And for me, from my perspective, again, going back to my childhood, like
Right.
Black experience, growing up in a Black neighborhood, seeing, my partners and, the things that they were going through, and taking all of that and using that as fuel for me to do something, to use my skills to actually do something to improve the lives of other people that I know may not have that opportunity. And so
Mm.
that's kind of how the childhood and all the work and the things that I went through sort of started to gel together. And I
Yeah.
wrote a proposal for Inneract Project. I drove it around to community centers in Seattle at the time because I was coaching basketball. So I had a lot of people in the
Right.
community that I was connected to. And
Mm.
dog, man, I mean, this is like 2004, 2003,
Right.
2004. And now it's more popular. It's more popular
Yeah.
for, coding organizations and design organizations. Back then, nobody wasn't feeling that. They wasn't feeling
No,
it, man.
I'm trying to think through this myself.
Right,
Like I was the only black person in my design program. And so I can't imagine there was no like we talking about 3% right
right.
now. I mean,
It's it was
it,
crazy. So I'm sitting
did
up
you
there like I'm sitting up there like, man, like I got to do something. And so
right,
I literally, all I did was I wrote a proposal
right,
and I just said, you know what, I'm just going to go around. And here's the killer, Harrison.
right.
Like when I first started doing this, people in the community, like Black folk, was not feeling it. They was
Mm,
like, our kids don't want this. I was going to community centers and I was like,
yeah.
this class is free. All I want to do is just come in your community center. I'll do it for free.
Mm,
And I got turned down by a lot of community
right.
centers. And finally, I found one in like West Seattle, Delridge Community Center. And I had been coaching basketball at another community center. And there was this woman who worked there. She was moving
Mm,
over to this Delridge Community Center. She was like, you can bring it there. And
mm,
that's was the first thing. I started off with three
right,
kids in 2004. I just basically opened up. I designed posters. I put them all over the place in all the community centers, posted them.
right.
I started off with three kids at the beginning of summer 2004. By the end of
Mm,
summer 2004, I was working with 30 kids. You know,
wow.
so and then from there it's just just grew.
You're just navigating this by yourself.
Yep.
Because I always ask, did you have any mentors? Like, was there anyone that advised you? What was that like?
I was fortunate enough to have um, Tony Gable, rest in peace. That was my boy.
Mm,
Tony Gable he was someone who I really, really respected. And I know today that if, well, I can almost, I can say probably like if I didn't know him and I didn't get a chance to meet him, I don't know if I would have stayed in design. He
mm,
was a Black man, had his own business. And see, that was an anomaly too. That was an anomaly back in the day because there wasn't a lot of Black graphic designers that have their own business, and he had his own business.
mm,
And, he was working on projects for Microsoft, and and his work was cultural, right? So I was
right,
connected with it, and it's like the way I
right.
found his work. I was going to an art store, a poster shop in the Black community in Seattle. And I
Yeah.
saw his poster in there and I asked about it. And then the guy who worked there was like, oh, yeah, it's a local designer, Tony Gable. And then
Mm,
he kind of told me his name. I looked him up. We connected with each other, and that's how we became cool. And
right. So he sounds like prolific in the community alone.
yeah, man. I mean, he was integrated in the community. He was doing stuff, but he was also a musician. So he actually
Mm,
was in a band that gave Kenny G his start. So the
wow.
man was cool, man. I mean, he was a cool bro. And he and I used to always talk about, like the importance of, doing for our own people. And I had him as a mentor. And when I started
Mm,
Interact Project, all again going back to childhood, and then meeting Tony, and having somebody there to kind of talk about some of the things that I was trying to do, and
Right.
the projects that I wanted to work on. Tony was kind of there to kind of say, Mo, I would do it like this, or I would try this, or he'd be like, man, I
Mhm.
support what you're doing. Keep doing that, brother. Keep going. And
Right.
that really motivated me. But for Interact Project, you know, I just, there was no context other than the fact that I had also had professors there, Annabelle Gould and Doug Watton and a bunch of other professors, Karen Chang, and who were really kind of there to kind of help, um, me navigate through this project, Interact Project, and kind of help support it. Chris
Right.
Abzuko is another teacher who was there. Um, but I was learning on the fly. I didn't know anything about
Mhm.
starting a nonprofit or doing this work. I was just excited, to be doing something that really, really mattered to me. And that's what drove me. I just kept going and
Yeah.
kept going, kept building the curriculum. And, after the first year, I was working at the University of Washington. They let me have space there to work. And I was working with community organizations, bringing kids in. And, I had graduate students at the University of Washington that were working with me and helping me, draft curriculum. And then they were teaching the class. Um, it's just a lot of things now that I look back at it that really kind of fell into place. And it
Right.
wasn't really something that I really imagined that I would be doing to this day. But, I just kind of kept going at it. And I just kept being inspired by the work that I was doing and the people that I was working with and working for.
Right. And the Interact project has been going on long enough too, where
16
you've
plus
had,
years.
yeah, where you've had students start at a young age and kind of go through what does like that curriculum look like over time?
Yeah,
And I would love to just kind of dive into that.
I call it a life cycle because I
Yeah.
think the mis sort of guided sort of theory around what we do is that we're trying to take kids from middle school all the way to career.
Mm.
We do do that, but really what I'm trying to build is a system. And the system is such that whether you're coming in at middle school, whether you're coming in at high school, whether you're coming in at college or early career, that we have something for you. And
Mm.
whatever whatever stage in life that you're at, the goal is that we should be able to provide some level of resources or opportunities for you to be successful in the design business. Now,
Right.
students that I've had, like, yeah, I have students that have gone to college. Some of them are working. Some of them are still in college. Um, a lot of my students, and I'm always transparent with people about this because I think that, um, you know, a lot of times the industry that I work in, sometimes you have people that kind of conflate what they're really doing. And
Mm.
I don't want to do that. Like, it's, like until I would say 2000 and I would say probably 2014, 15 is when I really started tracking students. All the way up until that point, man, I was just teaching. I'll be honest. I was trying to learn. I was learning how things work. I was sort of trying to understand what students were interested in. And it was
Mm.
just me, and I had
Right.
volunteers, I had no staff. So
Mm.
I was doing everything I can to try to teach the curriculum. I was trying to raise money. I was working a full time job. I was trying to sort of manage the volunteers. I was doing it all by myself, dude. And
Right.
so it was tough for me to do everything and then keep on track on where all the students were. And looking back on it, like if anybody ever thinks about starting a nonprofit like this, it's very important that you establish early on, like, fundraising and
Mm.
metrics and understanding all these things that I didn't understand when I first started. But, the track for how we work and the things that we do are really, embedded in the fact that we're multi-layered and we have various different entry points. Um, the most important thing, or the three major things that like listeners should understand about our organization, is that one, we cover education, which I think is obvious. We have curriculum that spans across um, early discovery to intermediate to advanced courses
Right.
to advanced to professional courses. And you know education is obviously a big portion of what we do, but
Right.
education is not, it's not the only means for improving diversity in design. You have to have advocacy. You have to have
Yep.
ways where you can show other people of color in the business that other people can also learn and see, like, okay, if I start here, I can eventually be like that person. You think
Right.
about basketball, it's like that, right? Like you have
Right.
you know, a free basketball court you can go and practice on. I have my coach who I can help teach me and learn. But then I can also see Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and LeBron James and see that they have
Yeah.
long lasting careers and they're making good money. And I can see, like, okay, they started by doing this and getting taught this
Right.
way, and then they became this. That is what Interact Project is trying to do. So we have
Yeah.
education, advocacy, and then the last is like entrepreneurship. And I think
Mm.
entrepreneurship is not about trying to uh, make kids millionaires. It's about how do you get a young person to understand how to design something in such a way where they have certain restrictions, or they can
Yeah.
understand the client or the person that they're designing for with a set of limitations. And so that could
Hmm.
be, you know, you only have $20 and you have to figure out how to design this one thing for this group of people, or, come up with a solution that you can design that is meant to help you make, $5 a month. I mean, it can be something as simple as that. And it's just training
Right.
them to think a little bit
Right.
more differently than just, oh, I have this problem. I'm just going to put this thing together. I'm just going to put it out in the world. And people may like it, people may not like it. Really trying to get them
Yeah.
to think a little bit deeper about the stuff that they're designing. So, I know I've
Yeah.
talked a lot about it, but it's very hard, Harrison, because there is so much stuff that we do, that even goes beyond that, with, like,
Mm.
systemic barriers and things that we're trying to address with our students and understanding the
Yeah.
backgrounds that they come from, that I can be talking for hours and hours about that. So I'll stop it there, but um, there's a
Yeah.
lot of work that happens with this.
Yeah. And by the way, I think those three areas, I mean, that's industry wide. Those things are
Yep.
missing. And I think it speaks a lot to how well equipped designers that go through the Interact project will be once they get into the workforce, or even just kind of like brushing up on what they already know.
Yep.
um, that was really kind of part of that was what my emphasis around, like, what is a principal
Yeah.
designer, right? Because even today there's still a lot of confusion on what does a career look like for a designer alone.
Yeah.
So I think these are very, very important topics, and even more relevant, just thinking about 16 years. It's interesting because I probably say within the last 5-7 years, there's been just a ton of growth on these engineering boot camps alone, and you've been there the whole time,
Yep. I've
right?
been there
And
before
so,
them. So, like,
exactly,
that's the part that gets me, excited because,
yeah,
with the explosion of engineering and the coding program, the wonderful coding programs, by the way, that are out there, a lot of
yeah,
great ones. Um, I know that, there is a chance for Interact Project to be able to get there because um,
yeah,
designers are the architects. And I tell people all this all the time, and it's no disrespect to engineering, no disrespect to them at all. But, like,
yeah,
I talk about the architect and the contractor, and how,
mm,
like, the contractor can build your home. I mean, they can build your home, They can, put it together and design it to their specs, but the architect is going to go in there and they're going to be mindful of the people that are living in there, the environment that the house is being built on. They're going to be mindful of like how the flow of the house is, where the stairs need to be, how wide the stairs need to be, depending on who the people are,
Mm,
and then the colors, and being considerate of all these things, and then on top of that, making it absolutely beautiful. And I think that you know, designers and engineers kind of work that way, and
yeah.
it's critical to all the things that products and services that we build today, that people really understand the importance of design, and how the things that we interact with and the things that have been innovated over the years have come at the hands of designers in engineering working seamlessly together to try to improve the lives of humanity.
Awesome. Well, hey, look, how can folks learn more about Interact Project and also follow you or get in touch with you?
So I tend to send everybody to our website. I think that's probably the best place to do it. Is you know there's ways to get involved, and if you go to our website, we have a get involved link which has more information about how to get involved if anybody is interested in that. We also obviously, like, I try to ask people to donate. Recurring donations really really help us, because we're not, at this point, we're not well funded organization, but we are able to make do with what we have, but we really need more. We need to hire more people, so
Hmm.
donations really, really, really do help us, even if it's just like $5 or $10 a month. Like, it helps. And if anybody wants to follow me, I'm generally on Twitter. That's my sort of platform of choice at this point. I don't tweet often, but I do, tweet and talk about things that are important to me and share things that are important to me that are happening with Interact Project. So you can find me at uh, DLROWSEOM, and I'm on Twitter. You can that's my at handle. And this is basically Mo's World spelled backwards. So if anybody wants to follow me there, they can find me there. That's where I'm at.
Is there anything you want to leave with the listeners that we didn't cover in the episode?
I think the only thing I would like to leave with the listeners is that, it's very important that designers really understand the importance of visual images and how visual images play a role in shaping narratives. And it has to be very well thought through in terms of how you're delivering products and services and visual images, because they carry a lot of weight in terms of not only people's perception, but also the marginalized groups that are being affected by those visual images. So,
Hmm.
people out there, if you're listening, that's why it's very important to have people of color working on projects, just a diverse range of people. It's really needed in the business. And, you know, I just want to leave that because I think that's really important, that people really need to understand and know about the stuff that we're doing and what I think is important for our business.
Mo, I appreciate the
Yeah.
conversation. It was super enlightening and inspiring. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
What's going on, world? Just letting you know that Technically Speaking is on Clubhouse. So if you have access to the application, go ahead and search for Technically Speaking and join the nearly 5,000 members globally every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We talk about a whole range of different topics supplemental to a lot of the themes on the show. We've got folks that are early in their careers, late in their careers, across different industries, all sharing their experiences, expertise, and tips on stage. It's something that you don't want to miss. I personally look forward to having you in the club and seeing you on stage. That's Technically Speaking on Clubhouse. Enjoy this episode? be sure to hit the subscribe button on whatever podcast platform that you use. You can also subscribe to my newsletter at harrisonwheeler.com for the latest industry insights, new article posts, and announcements of future guests on the show. Once again, thanks for listening to this episode of Technically Speaking. I'm your host, Harrison Wheeler, and I'm out.